expect a lot of things from the collaboration between Azure and OpenAI. And by the way, if there are any questions as we go along, just throw them in the chat. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to just throw any questions in the chat. But the whole goal of this session is just really to give you a very, very high level overview of the service itself on Azure, and just spark some interest into business use cases that you could use or build to solve for customers. We're actually already using the OpenAI service to solve business problems for customers. So I hope this just sparks a bit of interest. And so I will get going with this. And just before I go into the slide, I'll just introduce myself shortly. So my name is Nikhil. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Vastmindz, which is a Microsoft for Startups company. The company actually did win the Microsoft Partner of the Year award last year against all the startups. I'm also an AI engineer myself. I was actually the winner of an OpenAI hackathon that was hosted in November last year. So I'm very familiar with how the API works and the limitations as well with this service. So if you use the OpenAI API directly through the company, it's very similar to that of the Azure OpenAI API. But I mean, one thing I'm extremely passionate about is using Azure Cognitive Services, which I think is a powerful suite of services to get to market as fast as possible. And now OpenAI serves as part of that suite. But I've explored the suite. I've done several videos on using one or more services within this suite to actually build a SaaS solution that can be productized and sold to customers. So I really think there is a powerful set of tools here that you can use to get to market as fast as possible. So really passionate about this this suite especially for developers. But one of the questions I wanted to solve today with the OpenAI service is rather than just talk about the service in general, just wanted to maybe pique some interest about how you could solve a potential business problem, or actually even build your own business product. And I don't know if you've seen on the news, but as Microsoft is considering its $10 billion investment, there's a lot of talk around how Microsoft will integrate OpenAI into its Office products. And that, of course, includes Outlook 365. And I think one of the questions it may solve is how many hours do we spend processing emails per day? And just to focus on the problem a little bit more, we actually spend a lot of time processing emails. On average, the average person spends about 2.24 hours per day, which is in total 24 days per year, processing emails. So if we can use OpenAI to increase the productivity of which we can process emails, then even by 50%, that we save ourselves 12 days every year, which we could do something else. But it's a huge amount of time we spend processing emails. Again, any increase in productivity would be massively helpful. And this is where we can bring OpenAI into the picture. And one of the kind of solution architectures using OpenAI is this right here, and it's very simple. Really, the solution would require you to access the Outlook 365 inbox, which it could do through the Graph API. But what you want it to do is you'd want it to read your emails, so you don't have to, essentially. You'd want it to categorize your emails. So one category of, for example, could be, let's say we are a startup or another business. We'd want to categorize any sales opportunities. We'd want to categorize any investment opportunities. We'd want to categorize any customer support emails. So rather than just trailing through hundreds of emails in an inbox one by one, you'd be able to categorize them using the OpenAI service and therefore prioritize them more efficiently, depending what team you're in. So especially if you wanted to increase the productivity of a sales team, we could categorize all emails that are sales opportunities and direct them to the sales team to process as soon as possible. The other thing we want to do is we want to generate suggested responses to each of your emails. So not only can we categorize them, but we also want to generate responses to each of the emails. Now, if you were to build this, I always like when we're building a product like this, I always like to kind of hypothesize who the target market would be. And if we were to consider if we were to sell this as a standalone SaaS solution, usually you'd want to target small teams, and you'd want to target startup entrepreneurs. And this is a hypothesis. And you could target other business units, but I would say it's always good to start with a niche target market when you're selling a new SaaS solution, just so you can gauge interest from this market. And likely, if it works in one target market, it will work everywhere else. So this is just a quick fun hypothesis of who I think would be a great buyer persona and who the initial target market would be for this type of product. But if we actually look at the technical architecture behind this, there's a couple of things we'll have to do. So the first is that we'll need to authenticate with the Microsoft Graph API. So for any Azure or for any Outlook 365 user, to be able to get access to their emails, to be able to read emails, to be able to send emails, we need to authenticate with the Microsoft Graph API. And I don't know how many people are familiar with using the Graph API in this call, but it's a very powerful tool to get user analytics on any Outlook 365 user. And Microsoft does have a Graph Explorer, which you can go ahead and test out. And actually, in fact, just so it's very clear, if I go to Microsoft Graph, there we go, Graph Explorer, you can actually test out without, this is a very easy to use no-code interface, which you can use to test out the Graph API. So as you can see, there are various endpoints that you could use to get information about yourself. So for example, you would just sign in, it would show you which tenant you're under. You can run queries, and if I run this query, for example, it would give me this response, and it showed me my display name, give a name, job title, and so on. It's a powerful tool. I can even get information about my current calendar. If any of you ever use a tool called Viva Insights, Viva Insights uses Graph API heavily to get information on your upcoming meetings. And Viva Insights also tries to schedule for you large blocks of focus time for you to concentrate throughout the day. And it does that by first accessing your, do we have a question coming in? Or maybe not? Okay, no worries, I'll carry on. But it does that by accessing your calendar, looking at all of your available meetings, and scheduling time when it thinks you can spend some time focusing on a particular piece of work. So Graph API is very powerful. I definitely encourage anyone to check it out. I'll also put the link in the chat as well. But if we go back to the architecture here, so a couple of things we'll need to do. We need to authenticate with the Graph API. Using the Graph API, we can then fetch a number of emails. And so we can pull down a list of emails. Now we could later configure this part to only pull down, let's say, for example, focused emails, because as you know, Outlook 365 categorizes email into either focused or other, with focused being more important. Generally, other emails are come under marketing emails or other emails which are not so important. But for now, we'll consider simple architecture. So we'll pull down a bunch of emails. Now, when you do pull in emails, they do come in a slightly strange format. So there will need to have that you will need to actually pass those emails in some way. And I'll just show you for anyone who is interested. I'll show you exactly what happens when you ask Graph API to fetch a bunch of emails. So for example, it would fetch emails, it would fetch an array of emails within this value key. And it's just simply an array of JSON objects which have information about an email. And you can see this whole object is one email, and it is, I can see the subject line, I can see the body preview. I can also see the raw body, which is in HTML. So I'll need to pass this entire HTML block to be able to actually be able to get the important points in the meeting itself, in the email itself. So you can see there's a lot of probably regular expression parsing we need to do to actually get this in a format which is understandable. So I just wanted to show you this is exactly how an email is delivered through the Graph API. So once we pass that, then we can actually start using the Azure OpenAI Service, and we can use it first to generate a classification. So we can ask OpenAI to classify whether certain emails either are a sales opportunity, investment opportunity, or any other category that we choose. And then we can also use Azure OpenAI to generate a response. So a couple of things I want to touch on before we look at some high-level code. I do want to touch on how you would get set up on Azure OpenAI, because I do get this question a lot. So I'm not sure how many people have subscribed to this service. But what you'd have to do is you'd have to navigate over to Azure Cognitive Services. And then you would head over to Azure OpenAI Service. And you would just go ahead and click on it. Now, from what I understand, there still is a wait list for this service, but you can go ahead and click Apply Now. And you'd have to fill in this sheet. So it would ask for simple information like your first name, last name, everything else. So you'll have to fill in this sheet to actually be able to get access to this service. But it's a very simple form. And once you click Submit, you should get an email within, I would say, at least 7 to 10 days of whether you've been accepted into this program. Now, once you have, this would be available under your subscription ID in the Azure portal. So once you've been assigned to this, you would head over to the Azure portal, assuming you have an Azure subscription at this point. So that's an important prerequisite. So this is my Azure portal. Obviously, I have a bunch of other resource groups and services running. But what you want to do is you want to head over to Cognitive Services.